What's the role of cultural and international cooperation in the protection of human rights in conflicts? How does art reflect the war and fight stereotypes? My name is Alim Aliev. I'm a Deputy Director General at the Ukraine Institute and moderator of this panel. And the next 45 minutes we will try to answer this and other questions. And I'm honored to introduce our speakers: Iryna Tsilyk, Ukrainian filmmaker and writer, a member of Pan-Ukrainian, the winner of the Directing Award World Cinema Documentary for the film The Earth is Blue as an Orange at 2020 Sundance Film Festival. And online with us, Amila Lagumdzija, Head of Arts Western Balkans, British Council. Amila had led initiatives including national cultural institutions, creative industry development platforms, public administration departments, creative tech, startup communities, and the independent creative scene across the Western Balkans. Good afternoon, dear Iryna, and good afternoon, dear Amila. And I would like to remind our audience, which is present online and offline, about the opportunity to ask a question and make a remark in the second part of our discussion. There are many overlaps between the field of human rights and art. Both are universally applicable. Both are concerned with the question of what is dignity, identity, of vision for the future, and of the mission of mankind. And my first personal question to both of you: what prompted you to start to raise the issue of human rights in your activities? Who want to start first? Amila?
Sure. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's really an honor to be here, and congratulations to Iryna for her award. It's really great to share the panel. Speaking from the perspective of Western Balkans, I can only open with the fact and a statement that the impact of violence is catastrophic. Impact of conflict, now speaking 26 years later, still has very, very evident manifestations in the society of Western Balkans. And recognizing the fact that had it not been for some artistic interventions, lots of the progress would not have been made. Speaking from the perspective of the British Council, I can also say that the purpose of a cultural relations organization is to build trust and understanding and help us connect with each other through creativity. So it's only logical to bring these two very aligned missions of fighting for the, as you said, for the basic human dignity and for the basic human rights, which reach far beyond the basic existence and physical security. We can talk about other aspects of human dignity that art can very well help people regain, I would say. I also recognize that throughout British Council's existence, it was established during the conflicts and the uncertainty of the 1930s, and exactly for that purpose, to connect people to each other for, as I said, for that better understanding. Over the years, it seems that we over and over see that after the conflict, right after the aid workers, right after the medical aid, artists are the first ones on the front lines of peace building. And that's a very, very powerful and a very hard burden to take on. I think it's imperative to support the artists who are willing and who are always making those bridges between communities, between individuals, between institutions as well. And it really is only logical to support them in what they do so very well. They know exactly what to do. Their mission is to provoke, to be the sort of the corrective of the standard social norms. They help us think differently. They help us take on different perspectives. I mean, we've heard throughout the day how important it is for building empathy, for dealing with trauma, but also for countries to connect to each other as well. So I would say that this is probably the most important mission a cultural relations organization can take, is to support those who do bring the change in those very, very difficult times.
Thank you, Amila. Ірина, я теж це питання поставлю.
Iryna, I would like to pose the same question to you as well. What has actually prompted you? What has inspired you in your work, in your books, in your films to start speaking up about the topics of the human rights? Okay, good day, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to start with saying, because I was listening to my colleague and I was thinking about, artists, the people of cultural professions, they never owe anything to anyone. They are not forced to speak about some important topics like on human rights or whatever, but it always turns out that during the times of the great change, during the times of the big shifts with the state, with the people around you, with your own personal ideas, when everything is changing in your own personal experience, it's quite natural that most of the people in creative professions, they respond to those events around them in some certain ways. And each and every person out of those cultural workers, each of every one of us, are looking for our own way to describe of what is going on with the world outside and what is going on with us. So, speaking on my personal experience, for the recent 7 or 8 years, they have divided my life on before and after, even though it might sound like a very loud words, but starting with the revolution of dignity, the annexation of Crimea, the war, and all of the later events, that's all made me respond the way I can and the way I know how to. So, I'm being very egoistic in that, I might say, because I am writing and I am filming something that is important for me. I'm making my own pain into arts. But sometimes it always finds the response in other people. In directing, there is the principle that is in Latin sounds like pars per totum. So you're showing a part instead of whole. So you're showing a part of experience by actually linking it to the whole experience. So these little stories about those little people who live in the time of the great change are important. So when I'm, for example, showing one woman who is in the military during the Russian and Ukrainian war, is protecting her country, showing one family out of many other families and many other civilians who live in the war zone, we're actually making a statement of everyone. We're showing it with a different point of view, with a different perspective, and everyone does it the way they can do that. And I'm also have become in the part of this general process, I believe. Thank you very much.
From activity of the Ukraine Institute, we also use as a cross-sectoral principle of combining art and human rights. One of the projects we are currently working on is a theater performance, Crimea 5 AM. An interactive documentary performance tells the stories of Crimean Tatar citizen journalists and activists, and who are politically imprisoned by Russia Federation. And this project aims to draw global community attention to the human rights violations in Crimea. And Amila, could you share with the audience your experience of the project related to the topic of human rights, and what human rights topic are you focusing on? Yeah, because it's very wide when we say about human rights. It can be women's rights, it can be indigenous people, it can be children's rights, etc., etc.
Sure, thank you. I'd like just briefly comment on what Iryna said earlier. The power of art and artists really cannot be overestimated. We cannot put such huge pressure on artists to deal with the trauma and to deal with repairing the damage that is caused by conflicts. In that sense, it's very much a joint effort of always the activist groups, the NGOs who are, as I said, probably the first ones on the front lines at peace building activities, but very much supported by the wide voice that the artists may give them. We heard earlier that this agency for giving the art being an agency for giving a voice to marginalized groups, and that's exceptionally important, especially in societies who, after the conflict, remain very closed and remain very focused and tight within each other in terms of different communities, perhaps, and building those links and really instilling, first of all, probing and trying to establish the links and trust and the first connections between the communities is essentially important, and that's very well and very effectively done through the arts, because people gather around common interests. They gather around music. They gather around the ability to speak their mind, the ability to comment and have a dialogue with each other, and the ability to really create something on their own. So in that sense, I mean, I can maybe mention one of the most profound examples of how film impacted human rights, specifically in Bosnia and Herzegovina. In 2006, Jasmila Žbanic's film titled Grbavica, which talks about a woman who is a victim of rape, and her dealing with trauma with her teenage daughter who was born out of that rape. Up to that point, our activist groups have been advocating for the rights of women to gain the status of civilian war victims. They didn't have that status as soldiers did. After the film was launched, after the film won the Golden Bear, it really gave such a massive voice to that group of people and that group of women who had no rights up on that point. And it resulted in Bosnian parliament adopting and legalizing their status in being recognized as victims of war and as being recognized and entitled to state support and to further support as any other victims coming out of that conflict. It's not exactly, I mean, it's a project, but it really is a piece of artwork, and it demonstrates how powerful it can be in terms of when it's joined in by other initiatives. I can perhaps reference one of the projects from within the British Council, and I'm really glad that we're having this conversation after the panel about women's rights, because as we recognize throughout the Western Balkans, making connections between institutions such as museums and galleries was essential in terms of crossing those borders. Just to be clear, in the Western Balkans, there's still limited travel potential. There's visa regimes that restrict people going from one country to another. And although there is a healthy amount of collaboration between cultural institutions, the administrative limits that are imposed by the politics make it a little more difficult. So in our project titled Perceptions, we went into the collections of national arts galleries and national museums to inspect how many women are really represented in these national collections of art. How many women artists are there? And on the other hand, how are women portrayed in the works of art? By gathering 6 curators around this topic from 6 different countries, they were able to explore and really pinpoint to this particular topic of basic human rights and basic visibility of women representation in finding out that some museums didn't possess any women artists, and on the other hand, portrayal of women all across had been very stereotypical. Having an exhibition like this really put museums at the forefront of the discussion of women's rights and human rights in general. And it brought in the public into the museums to really discuss this global issue, I would say. That was one of the times when museums really took the forefront in leading a very, very important discussion. And after the project is gone, we really do see a lot of after effects after that project in terms of collaboration of galleries, exchange of artworks, deeper research into the issues that we prompted and raised through this project. So I hope that illustrates a little bit more on the power of making those connections and the cultural institutes who can really facilitate these connections and conversations.
Amila, from your perspective, what challenges artists and managers facing while working on such topics?
Challenges are many, and perhaps somebody who has worked directly as an artist can speak better about the difficulties. But as I have witnessed, first of all, we really have to be aware that these people go at the forefront and risk their lives. They put themselves in very dangerous situations, and not only physical. When we move away from the physical danger, they take on the trauma from people that they work with. It's exceptionally important and delicate to work with somebody's trauma, and artists and cultural workers they take on this challenge, and we cannot ignore the fact that they take on a portion of the burden as well. So I would say that's probably the strongest challenge that they might face. I can also refer back to my earlier point that we cannot overestimate the power of artists, and we cannot expect them to remedy all the damage that is being done by the conflict. And it really needs to be part of wider peace-building activities that are planned and implemented.
Yeah, thank you. Iryna, я, власне, хочу...
So I want to go back to the question and to your projects, because what we've noticed at the beginning, a lot of texts, a lot of publications, you were the author of, and then we recollect the Invisible Battalion movie, and then we talk about the earth is as blue as an orange. Yes. So, quite often, even recently, I've heard of the following, that any discussion related to complex topics, that it's not just difficult, you know, that the audience is quite small when you take these topics. But when we take your last movie, it has been everywhere, like hundreds of festivals, and how do you think, if we talk about these aspects, you know, literature and cinematography, what is the key thing for this to, what you can do for this to actually get out of this bubble. I can go a little bit back, because when I told you that we don't have to do anything as artists, if you just create something because the topic is important, it actually it becomes very formalized. You reap what you sow, and you reap very formalized fruits. I can call that. Sorry. Yeah. I'll focus. Yeah. Formalization. Now, at the same time, we can see that along with the risks of manipulation, or when our attempts to tell about what we feel are not quite clear, so we have this explosion of various arts, and it gives birth to very strong movies, or other art items. So when we try to filter it, we'll see what will stay there. Oh, sorry. It's a little bit hard for me to yeah. I do feel very, very weird. I'm sorry, yeah, maybe it's because of the low pressure and low blood pressure. Now, coming back to the topic, what power the art actually has, I'm a little bit skeptical, let's say, about this issue. But on the other hand, within last years, my professional activity, I see that it works. It gives result. Art is a universal language, various types of art, and it triggers emotions. It refers first to emotions. When we use the language of movies and books to talk to our people in our country, in other countries of the world, we actually raise it from the depth, some basic things which actually are common for all of us. Even despite the fact that we don't know there is any common experience, if our counterparts had the same challenges, if they know what war is, they all have certain complications. For them, it's sometimes hard to exist, and these basic stuff like the human rights, this is really close, and this is something we all may relate to. So in my opinion, the language of surveys, dry statistics is losing comparing to books and films, which actually hit us and we just fall down, and we turn the 180 degrees. I saw how it works with various audiences. It just, bring us down. So to be more specific, in the first years of war, I've had these literary presentations in Donbass and European countries, and in my country, what I was amazed with, how many people came to poetic evenings and poetic soirees. These were hundreds of listeners, so military, volunteers, academicians. They wanted to have a dialogue. They were listening to poetry, but it was more. It was something more. We were like negotiating in this specific process. Then I went to another, to absolutely other audience, to European country, and there I had another experience with my poetry, because not all those people actually understood what I was talking about. Not everyone realized what my poetry was about. Not everybody knows what's happening in my country. Well, some people call it a civil war, and quite often these presentations, these evenings, triggered other dialogues, because I came there to talk about poetry, and I had to raise awareness and use my fingers and some simple formulas to explain what was happening in Ukraine at that moment. And it's like I didn't want to be a part of the cultural diplomacy. It was not my task. And I did want to be a messiah in some way, but that was, again, a part of what I was doing. And then I started focusing more and more on films, on documentaries, because it has unique tools. We watch real people around us. In a way, we observe ourselves, actually, because it's about us. And it gave me more understanding that art itself has a unique power to change the world, to shape the world. An Invisible Battalion project is a unique case because everything started with a survey on women taking part in Russian-Ukrainian war, and a part of this project was a documentary with 3 Ukrainian directors, female directors, 6 stories about various women taking part in hostilities. And thanks to this movie, thanks to this project, thanks to the campaign, informational campaign, we promoted it. We extended the list, for example, of positions that may be taken by women in the armed forces of Ukraine. It's a real result. It was something extraordinary because one of my characters, one of the ladies, a very interesting case, Iryna Tsilyk, she actually took part in the military operations by Aidar battalion. But according to her documents, she was a seamstress. Just imagine that. She was officially registered as seamstress. In the beginning of the war, you know, females who took part in military operations, their rights were violated. They have no chance to be officially registered as soldiers, you know. And the movie helped us to change the law. That was a bright example on how the art sometimes is coming to another level of game, to a more serious one. And the presentation of a film allowed us to show it to different people, really diverse audiences. In the Canadian Parliament, when you meet you meet different people all around the world. When our military had chance to exchange experience with their colleagues from European countries and the North American countries, it was a manifestation, a pure manifestation of additional tools given by the art. It was a proof. Art helps us to change our life elsewhere. So, yes, when the last film, the story, I want to touch this story a little bit more because it's really interesting, not just to get the response, yes, how people reacted, but how did you note? How did you fix it? How people did change their attitude about Ukraine after Earth is as blue as an orange? Well, this documentary actually is quite a unique story for my professional career and for Ukrainian documentary heritage, because it became a successful film. First, we were marked with this important prize, and then the wave pushed it to the whole world. It was showed in more than 100 festivals on the screens, and I personally had a chance to present it with various audiences. Again, diverse audiences. Again, I watched, I observed how the movie is working. And our first shows we had in US, it was it was a huge emotional experience, the biggest one for me, because how we were accepted there, you know, how were we treated, that was unbelievable. Strong emotional response. When people laugh, cry, ask you millions of questions after you show them the film, when they don't let you go and they want to know more and more and more of what's happening in your country, when they come prepared and they use some terminology like Russian-Ukrainian war without some conflict elsewhere instead of that. So people are into it, and the film provokes them and makes them feel more and know more. Okay, comparing us to them, this distance, but still, the cinematography language is universal. People may find something for themselves in it. One of American critics wrote that our film is a story, is like Little Women, but just for Ukraine and Donbass, for Donbass Little Women. So they managed to find something similar in their literature. Well, and compare, of course. We had loads and loads of stuff, and sometimes I bumped into this low awareness of the viewers. They knew almost nothing about Ukraine. But again, we have another reason to launch the dialogue again and again. And that's how we tell of ourselves in this specific way. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Cultural diplomacy knows a lot of examples when human rights, topics of human rights are rising in art. One of the famous example it was in Balkans, after the conflict in the Western Balkans, you two played in Sarajevo a time when many still through of the city is dangerous, yeah. And that night, people gathered as U2 fans rather the separate ethnic groups. And Amila, my question to you is, how else can the language of art lead to reconciliation?
Well, in addition to everything that's been said so far, although individual cases really do always demonstrate over and over that the art does make these bridges, please allow me to refer to a recent study that was published by the British Council, UNIC, and IFA that really confirms the importance of arts and cultural diplomacy. Arts is a part of that, of course, that is an effective tool in working across many fragilities in society. So be it economic, security, environment for fragilities, but then most particularly and most importantly, the societal fragilities. And we've heard about, giving voice to the marginalized groups and bringing people together. I'll maybe continue on your music example, and one of the first artists also to enter Bosnia after the war were Nigel Osborne, Brian Eno, and Luciano Pavarotti, who worked. Brian Eno and Nigel Osborne is a Scottish composer who works in music therapy and works with youngsters and children to really bring them together and just reignite that creativity and I can't say it enough. Let them regain their basic human dignity after they've been through so much. After these music therapy workshops that were done by artists over and over in the city of Mostar, which now to this day suffers from administrative and political divide that has perpetuated this segregation of people through the education system and so on. Graduates of those music therapy workshops, an impressive man called Orhan Masno, he actually runs now a Mostar rock school. And from that day, he's been a very successful musician, of course, but he came back to his community and realized that the kids in the city of Mostar are segregated and they don't have opportunities for informal music education. So he brings them together, never talking about the conflict and never talking about reconciliation. They just play music. They simply play music, and he gives them that support as a musician. He gathers other people who can support them in growing their musical practices. And examples like that are really the demonstrated the power of what somebody can do without directly addressing the conflict. Because people essentially, they cannot be reduced down to their single identity or to that conflict that they went through. They really want to be seen as multidimensional beings as they are. And as I said, music really does bring them together.
Thank you, Amila. And so I'm opening the floor for your comments, for your questions, please. Yeah, please.
So I have a question. I guess more to Iryna. Maybe in my question there will be an answer hidden, but still it's interesting to get your opinion and your observations. So periodically we have these discussions related to cultural diplomacy, context and international relations, how to present Ukraine in the world on what is primary in our work and what is primary. The artistic quality and some complex statements and images to be present there, or vice versa. The primary thing is to present this positive picture, positive message transmission via a film. So how do you personally think? Working with complex issues and topics and showing some negative, let's say, components of our life in our routine, does it harm the positive image formation? Does it give a negative impact to the attitude of foreigners? Did you see something in your work when you promoted your movie which also shows very difficult situations, and it does not show anything pink and sweet, and it doesn't tell that we all are happy here and have a perfect life? So what is your opinion? There can be no simple answer for that question, and I don't have it. Sorry. We all are looking for answers to such kind of questions, and definitely we'll find a way to tell of what's happening with us. For me, what is closer, a way of being sincere. I really love people being sincere. I write and I shoot something that takes my heart, rips my heart out, you know. And there always is a risk that these inconvenient issues, painful issues, will create a quite unpleasant image of my country, will present it from its unpleasant side. But if we avoid any conversations, inconvenient conversations, we may put ourselves then in a dead end eventually, and we just need to look for, well, it's a question to how to talk, how to present. We have various examples, and we have very talented attempts, like The Bad Rose of Natalia Vorozhbit. This film is one of the most talented and well-made movies in Ukraine, I guess, in general. But it's obvious. If we talk about your question, I don't have a simple answer, I'm sorry. What image of Ukraine does it create in the world? I can't tell you. In my case, it's a little bit easier, like Earth is as blue as orange tells about nice family. These people are nice, these people are pleasant, and for many people in the world, there was something that triggered their empathy. But what is also important for me is to talk about us, not in the world, but have this internal dialogue. Tell Ukrainians about it. This film, when it was presented in movies, I got so many feedback from Ukrainian viewers who were so impressed that in Donbass they have those nice people living. And they have, the same problems and actually the same basic values and basic needs. This family from my movie speaks Russian, but Ukrainian-speaking viewers actually were crying when they saw the film. So it was not an obstacle. For me, that was, again, a revelation. We don't know ourselves. We have to meet each other again and again, and talk to each other and open each other. And movies and books, they do help us to understand who we are for each other, primarily. Then, yes, a very tricky question, and still we're looking for answers anyway. We're in the process. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to ask you, like the question to the both of our speakers today. I would like to ask you, in your opinion, do you believe we can show the tragic, like war or tragic events, deaths, in the way of using the humorous tools, using humor? What do you think about that?
You'll be first, please.
Yes, of course. I mean, the Balkans are somewhat known for their dark sense of humor, and I think that's fairly ingrained especially in the filmmaking. I can only refer to a film made by Dan Stanovic, who won an Oscar. I can't remember exactly which year for the best international film. And the basic storyline of that is who started the war. And it's about a various conflict of two soldiers who come across each other and have this banal argument of who started the war. And it does really portray the uselessness and the tragedy and and really the catastrophe of the conflict. through a very human and very, very humorous, I would say,
You know, I do believe that in arts, overall, there's no kind of prohibitions, or there's no some kind of genres that are uncomfortable for you. We can search for different genres and different ways to speak on some complex issues. And humor, grotesque, irony, that's all applicable, even when we speak about some really harsh things. It only will depend on how talented you will be in making that and showing that. You know, I do believe that rules are made for breaking them. So basically, there are some really narrow red lines that you will either cross or no, and every artist had the lines of their own. So I do believe that for me, the sense of humor in everything I do is very helpful. All of my protagonists, they have really good sense of humor in my documentaries and in my fiction work as well. So when people are saying about some really difficult things by laughing, that's important. But yes, I do understand that's maybe some kind of psychological mechanisms of protection. But when it makes people in the audience not just cry but laugh as well, those emotions, they work stronger together. At least I see that way.
Critical thinking. Save our planet, of course. Dear colleagues, dear Amila, dear Iryna, thank you for your inputs. Thank you that you will be a part of our cultural diplomacy forum.